Hi, I'm Marletha from Snowden Chronicles. Before we begin today's episode of the Snowden Chronicles, I want to take a moment to offer a very important disclaimer. As Armand and I continue digging into the life of our great-great-uncle, William Morse, we'll be touching on a subject that is deeply sensitive, and for many people, deeply sacred: the American Civil War. This was a conflict that shaped families, communities, and the nation itself. It still carries emotional weight today, and we want to acknowledge that up front. Our great-great-uncle William served in United States Colored Troops, the 35th Regiment, Company F, out of New Bern, North Carolina. He fought bravely at the Battle of Olustee in Florida, where he was shot in the thigh. After the battle, he was captured and taken to the notorious Andersonville Prison Camp in Georgia, one of the harshest and deadliest places a soldier could be sent during the war. William, a man born free, ultimately gave his life for freedom. His story is not just a family story, it's part of American history. And we want to honor him with accuracy, respect, and truth. Now, I want to be completely transparent. We are not historians, and we are not an authority on the Civil War. Armand and I are researchers, storytellers, descendants trying to piece together the life of a man who never had a chance to tell his own story. Our goal is to be 1,000% accurate in everything we present, but we know that history is complex and new information is always emerging. So as we publish these videos, if you have alternate views, additional facts, or corrections, we welcome them. Please feel free to respectfully share your thoughts in the comment section. Armand and I truly appreciate feedback, and we want this channel to be a place where learning, conversation, and community come together. This journey is personal, but it's also shared. Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and thank you for helping us honor William Morse and all those who served. Now, to this week's video. Imagine surviving one of the bloodiest battles of the American Civil War, only to be captured and sent to a place that history would remember as a literal hell on earth. A place where 45,000 men were crammed into a stockade built for a fraction of that number. A place where the water was poisoned, the air carried disease, and the camp commander would eventually face the gallows for his brutality. For over a century, a tragic clerical error buried the truth of one specific soldier. On November 5th of 1864, a man died in the filth of Andersonville Hospital. The clerks wrote his name down as William Moss, but that wasn't his name. His name was William Morse. He was an African-American soldier fighting for United States Colored Troops. He is also our great-great-uncle. Today, we are uncovering his extraordinary story, not just as a statistic of war, but as a hero who chose to step onto the battlefield to help end slavery and preserve the Union. William Morse's journey didn't start on the battlefield. Long before the war, he was born a free black man in Washington County, North Carolina. Growing up free in an era dominated by the institution of slavery meant constantly navigating a landscape of restricted rights, heavy suspicion, and the ever-present danger of losing that freedom. When the Civil War erupted, eastern North Carolina became a volatile war zone. After Union forces captured the coastal city of New Bern in March of 1862, the city transformed into a massive beacon of hope and a fortified sanctuary. Thousands of black men, women, and children flocked to the occupied city to seek protection. William was one of them. He took refuge behind Union lines in New Bern, seeking safety from the chaos of the Confederacy. But William didn't just want to hide behind Union lines. He wanted to fight. He officially stepped forward to enlist, joining Company F of the 35th United States Colored Troops, originally known as the 1st North Carolina Colored Volunteers. As a free black man, William didn't have to fight. He chose to put on that blue uniform. For Company F and the rest of the 35th United States Colored Troops, the stakes of the war were absolute. To understand why William would end up in the country's most notorious prison, we have to look at a high-stakes political standoff that happened shortly after he enlisted. In July of 1862, Union General John A. Dix and Confederate General Dix-Hill signed a formal agreement known as the Dix-Hill Cartel. Before this, capturing prisoners was a logistical nightmare for both sides. The cartel fixed this with a simple rule: a man for a man, rank for a rank exchange. If you had an odd number of high-ranking officers, there was a strict math equation to trade them for privates. For a while, the system kept prison populations low. Men were captured, paroled, and sent home or back to their units within weeks. But on January 1st, 1863, the entire landscape of the war shifted. President Abraham Lincoln officially allowed black soldiers to join the fight. Roughly 2/3 of these brave men were formerly enslaved. The other third, like our Uncle William, were free black citizens. They fought with unmatched ferocity because for them, the stakes were total freedom or absolute re-enslavement. The Confederate government reacted with outrage. On May 1st, 1863, the Confederacy declared that they would not treat captured African American soldiers as prisoners of war. Instead, they wanted to classify them as fugitive slaves. The policy was brutal. Black prisoners of war would be returned to a state of bondage, handed over to masters or worse. Lincoln refused to let his soldiers be enslaved. On July 30th, 1863, he issued General Orders 252, effectively shutting down the Dix-Hill Cartel. If the Confederacy would not exchange black soldiers fairly, the Union would stop exchanging prisoners entirely. This total shutdown created a massive crisis. With the prisoner exchange broken and the Union Army aggressively advancing, Confederate prisons in Richmond became dangerously overcrowded. They needed a new place, a secure place hidden deep in the South. On February 20th, 1864, they opened Camp Sumter. We know it today as Andersonville. On the exact same day that Andersonville opened its gates in Georgia, William, Morse, and Company F of the 35th United States Colored Troops were miles away in the pine forests of Florida, fighting for their lives. They were deployed at the Battle of Olustee. It was a chaotic, devastating defeat for the Union forces. The 35th United States Colored Troops was thrown into the thick of the meat grinder, forced to cover the retreat under a hailstorm of gunfire. During the retreat, William was struck in the thigh by a mini ball. To understand the horror of this, you have to understand the weapon. The mini ball was a heavy, soft lead bullet. When it hit human bone, it didn't just pierce it, it shattered it into fragments like glass. Even worse, the bullet would have dragged pieces of William's uniform, dirt, and bacteria deep into the wound. In a flash, William was immobilized, trapped in agonizing pain, unable to walk, and left behind as his regiment retreated. Wounded black soldiers were captured at terrifying high rates because they physically could not flee. For William, capture was just the beginning of the nightmare. He was forced into days of grueling transit via wagons and train cars toward Georgia. There were no bandage changes. There was no medical care. He was given nothing but filthy scraps of food, while his open thigh wound, filled with battlefield mud, began to fester and rot in humid southern heat. By the time they reached the gates of Andersonville, severe infection had already set in, because he arrived right at the beginning of the prison's operations, and he was one of the very first inmates. During its 14 months of operation, Andersonville was a death trap. It was commanded by Confederate Captain Henry Wirz, a Swiss immigrant whose management of the camp would later shock the civilized war. 45,000 Union soldiers were passed through here. Over 13,000 of them died from starvation, exposure, and disease. But out of those tens of thousands of prisoners, a tiny minority stood out. A group of only about 100 African American soldiers, verified by the National Park Service. William Morse was one of them. Out of those black inmates, approximately 33 died, a staggering 33% mortality rate. The details of what William and others went through inside this camp aren't speculation. We know that the graphic reality because of the extensive agonizing testimonies given during the 1865 war crimes trial of Henry Wirz, as well as the written recollections of survivors, both black and white soldiers, who lived to tell the tale. Their shared memories paint a terrifying picture of the camp hospital where William spent his final months. It was just a collection of filthy tents pitched on the bare earth outside the main stockade. Witnesses testified that men didn't have beds or mattresses. William would have lain directly on the hard dirt or a rough wooden plank. According to the trial records, the Confederacy was starved for resources, meaning there was virtually no medicine. Survivors recalled that wounds were rarely, if ever, cleaned, and bandages were either non-existent or stripped from the dead to be reused, caked in dried blood and pus. William's daily routine became an agonizing test of survival. His nourishment consisted of a meager handful of unbolted cornmeal mush. To wash it down, he had to drink water from the Stockade Creek, a stream that both black and white prisoners recalled was completely contaminated with the human waste, grease, and disease washing down from thousands of men upstream. Every single day, William looked around and saw horrors that survivors testified would cause the mind to fracture. They described men with amputated limbs literally rotting alive in the heat, maggots crawling through the open wounds, and flies swarming in black clouds over the living and the dead, who often lay side by side for hours because the staff was too overwhelmed or too indifferent to move the corpses. As a black soldier in a tiny minority, William was faced with extreme isolation. He suffered through raging fevers, starvation, and racially biased medical neglect, living with the terrifying constant fear that he would die completely forgotten. On November 5th, 1864, after nearly 9 months of enduring this living hell, William Morris's body finally gave out. He passed away in the dead house. But the tragedy didn't stop with his last breath. At Andersonville, death was a mass production line. Bodies were stripped of their clothing, piled into heavy wooden wagons, and carted out to a nearby field. There, massive open trenches were dug, and the dead were laid tightly side by side. The burial system relied on speed, not accuracy. A clerk would stand by the trench shouting out names to be logged into a book, often guessing the spelling or mishearing them over the noise of the shovels in the wagons. Because of systematic neglect and profound indifference toward black soldiers, their records were most likely to be mangled. When it came time to record our great-great-uncle's death, a careless clerk wrote down William Moss. With those 4 wrong letters, William Morse effectively vanished from history. His family was left in the dark, and his true sacrifice was buried in a sea of chaotic paperwork. But errors do not have to be the final word. At the end of Civil War, Camp Sumter was liberated. Captain Henry Wirz was arrested, put on trial by a military tribunal for war crimes, where those horrific conditions were laid bare before the world, convicted and hung for his atrocities. William Morse went through a meat grinder of history, a free man who left safety to volunteer, a brutal battle at Olustee, a shattering wound, capture, a torturous transport, and 9 months in a single Wirz prison camp on American soil. Yet he chose to serve. He chose to put on that blue uniform when the stakes for a black man were life or death. The fact that his name was recorded wrong is a tragedy. But the fact that we have found him changes everything. By speaking his real name today, we break that cycle of indifference. We pull him out of the shadows of a careless clerk's error and restore his rightful place as an American hero. Thank you for watching the story of our great-great-uncle William Morse of the 35th United States Colored Troops, Company F. Rest in peace, soldier. Your name is finally known.